Nope.
I yawned and glanced at my phone's clock. 12:16 a.m. The office was deserted long ago. The last office worker already headed home just shy of nightfall. The time of day the sun paints the city with glowing shades of reds and oranges, signaling the time for rest. For me, however, that would be my cue to get ready for work. See, I work as a janitor for an office building, and every night I come into work around 9 p.m. to clean the office space. My job is simple. I empty the trash, vacuum the carpet, do the windows, etc. General janitorial duties. It's pretty straightforward too, since the office is within a modestly sized building with only 5 floors. The actual office taking up only 2, and is shaped like a long rectangular hallway with a bend at each end. This means I can walk from one end of the floor to the other without missing an overfilled trash can. Today was a bit rougher than normal, though. Usually I would have already driven to a late night food joint for dinner by 11 p.m., but here I am instead, on my hands and knees, trying to scrape what I assume to be gum out of the carpet for nearly 20 minutes. Who even spits out gum onto the carpet? I muttered as the sticky lump of gray resisted my pulling with a paint scraper. The wad was flattened against the carpet floor after being stepped on so much, making it tough to remove. After a few more minutes of struggling, I sighed and sat back on my haunches. I glared at the sticky wad, thinking if it were to have feelings that my gaze was hurting them. I could have been stuffing myself with the Patty's late night special by now if it weren't for you, I spat as my stomach grumbled in agreement. After a minute, I unfurrowed my brow. Feeling a bit silly with my childish antics, I chuckled loudly and looked up at the fluorescent tubes that filled the silence of the office with white noise. Never thought I would be doing this for almost 3 years, I preached. Graduated from the local community college, and I still can barely find better work than before getting my fancy diploma. For someone with a diploma to live paycheck to paycheck, I must have angered some god. Having enough of my self-pity, I hoisted myself off the ground, grunting when I noticed my left leg was kneeling so long. Ignoring the pins and needles, I decided to try applying some magical WD-40 onto the stubborn stain. WD-40 solves everything, I mused. Rustling through the cleaning trolley that I kept my tools in, I grimaced when I noticed I didn't include a can of the sweet stuff. Shit, did I forget to double-check my tools? Racking my brain for an alternative, I quickly remembered I always carry a can in my car for emergencies. Mentally patting myself on the back, I walked towards the elevator in the middle of the office space and pressed the down arrow button. The elevator whirred as I heard it ascend from the lower floors. Someone's working real late tonight, I remarked, feeling a bit of camaraderie with the mysterious worker. I took a look at my phone's clock again. It read 12:32 a.m. I got on once the elevator dinged and pressed for it to head to the first floor. After getting off the elevator, I walked out of the office lobby and into the parking lot. The night was chilly from the January air. The office building I work in isn't situated in a populated area of the city, so it was no surprise to me that the parking lot was entirely empty except for me. "Good night," I jokingly said to the already gone late-night worker. Quickly, I walked to my car and popped open the trunk. Grabbing the can of WD-40, I locked up and got back into the office lobby. I walked up to the elevator and pressed the up arrow. I took a step forward and stopped when I saw the elevator doors were still closed. Surprisingly, I could hear the elevator whir again, descending from the upper floors. Am I not alone in the building? Would be strange, since there were no other cars in the lot. How is this person planning to get home, especially at this hour? I'm pretty sure I wasn't the only one who pressed another button to have it go back up. The elevator dinged, breaking my train of thought. I braced myself, expecting to greet a fellow late-nighter. As the doors slowly opened, I was confused to see that the elevator was completely empty. I looked around the carriage and then the lobby just to make sure I was truly alone. Did they change their mind and take the stairs instead? I wondered. Making sure I wasn't the butt of some joke, I decided it must be a programming quirk of the elevator. Shrugging it off, I got on. After a minute, I got off on the 5th floor and went straight back to work on the gum. I shook the can in my hand and gave the stain a liberal spray. After feeling satisfied with the amount of WD-40 soaking into the gum and carpet surface, I reached for the paint scraper that I had left. However, instead of finding what I was looking for, my fingers met carpet instead. I turned my head and saw that the tool I was just using moments ago was nowhere to be found. Did I misplace it? I questioned. Doing a scan around me, I didn't see the scraper anywhere. A little more irritated now, I got up and checked the adjacent cubes and desks around the gum stain. I was pretty sure I left it next to the stain, but I wouldn't be surprised if I absent-mindedly left it somewhere else. Where could it have gone? I sighed out. After 4 or 5 minutes, I decided to retrace my steps from where I had last seen it. So, I walked to the direction of the elevator, and just as I passed a couple of desks that blocked my view, I froze. I could see a small glint of metal and the fluorescent orange handle. The scraper was lying in front of the elevator doors. A small chill ran up my spine. Did I put that there? Or... I trailed off, not daring to finish that sentence. Suddenly, I felt less safe. Okay, I can't be letting something so small get to me. I just need to finish up my work and get out of here. I probably put the scraper in my pocket and it just fell out when I went to my car. This is just a freak coincidence, no biggie, I reasoned, trying to get my bearings back in order. I quickly grabbed the scraper and went back to the gum stain. This time, thankfully, the stain gave way a lot easier. After about 20 minutes of tugging, the majority of the gum was almost completely off. Turning to the cleaning trolley, I prepped the industrial-grade vacuum cleaner and switched it on to finish the job. The roar of the machine instantly drowned out the silence, which gave me some relief from the mounting silence and creeping paranoia. It only took a few passes over with the vacuum cleaner for the gum stain to be completely removed. Since I was already at it, I decided to also finish vacuuming the rest of the floor. Beneath the rumble of the vacuum, I easily fell into a rhythmic trance as I pushed and pulled the heavy machinery around the dark gray carpet. As I was lost in thought, the path of the vacuum crossed in front of the elevator doors. Suddenly, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. My head spun towards the direction I saw motion from, just in time to see the elevator doors opening completely. Instantly, my hairs were standing on end. As I stared in disbelief at the open doors, my brain was cramping in an attempt to reason how something like this could have happened. I turned off the loud vacuum, and as silence returned, I could hear how heavy my breathing had become. After what felt like almost an eternity, I was able to muster up enough courage to stammer out, "Hello? Is anybody there?" I waited, holding my breath for an answer that I'm not sure I even wanted. The elevator doors started to slowly close after a few seconds of waiting. My brain screamed at me to run down the stairs and just get out of this place altogether, but I couldn't get myself to move. I felt like my legs were lead weights, paralyzed by fear. Was there someone else in here with me? Did someone come in when I went to my car? Did I just not see them? My thoughts were moving a mile a minute. I felt like I was drowning in the silent aftermath of what I had just seen. Out of nowhere, a dark shape moved from my peripheral. I physically jumped from it and spun my head to the left. The office was fitted with 2 columns of light that spanned the entire overhead. Near the end of the long office space, just before the room turns to the right and towards the door to the stairs, I saw the farthest row of ceiling lights turn off. I felt my stomach drop like a cinder block. "That's a coincidence, right?" I whispered. I spoke in a low, hushed tone. Deep down, I felt like I had to stay quiet, like I feared I would be heard. Somehow, though, after minutes, I was able to break from my fear paralysis and slowly walked against the most outer rows of the desk. Peering over towards the broken ceiling light, I could see that the farthest row of the 2 lights were off, darkness filling into the void. "This is all crazy," I told myself. "This is all a bunch of coincidences happening one after another. There's nothing wrong, just weird quirks and bad lights. I just need to get done here, let maintenance know, and just get out." Taking a few deep breaths, I managed to calm my nerves enough to straighten myself out. I looked at the lights again, the darkness that waited behind it, and steeled myself. "This is my job," I insisted. I began to take small steps toward the dark side of the room to investigate. Thinking rationally, it probably is something to do with the wiring or the bulbs themselves. Hope I don't get blamed for that light. I tried joking aloud, slightly comforted by the fact that nothing responded. However, my false bravado instantly fell away with the next thing that happened. The lights began to go out, one by one. At first, a second row of lights turned off. I stopped mid-step. After a few seconds, a third row went. At this point, I was actually scared and began to turn towards the elevator. As more lights went out, the speed at which they went off increased dramatically. It was almost as if the shadows themselves were creeping up on me. Quickly, I dashed to the elevator and hit the down arrow button. Nothing. The doors would not open. I hit the button again, but the doors still resisted. This made my heart race even faster as fear and paranoia began to take over. I started hearing the lift gears move as the elevator ascended from the lowest floors. I turned my head towards the approaching darkness. It was coming at increasing speeds, now seconds between each light going out. I frantically pounded the button with my palms. My adrenaline started to course as my heart pounded in my chest. "Why isn't it here yet?" I shouted. I looked to the elevator door in desperate pleas, and then back to the dark. In desperation, I began banging on the doors as hard as I could. Anything was better than doing nothing at this point. As the last few lights above me flicked off, I stopped moving altogether. I don't know why, but I had a strange feeling I should stay as still and quiet as possible. It did not take long for the entire floor to be enveloped in darkness. I stood there in the pitch black. The only thing I could hear is my own heavy breathing and the turning of mechanical gears. I felt like I wanted to puke from how thick my fear was. Goosebumps raised all over me. It sounded like something hard hitting the carpet. What was that? The sound started getting faster. Not only that, it sounded like it was getting louder. Almost like footsteps. Something was approaching me. I began to panic as my adrenaline went into overdrive. I wanted to run from my place, but I couldn't see a thing around me. I was arguing the options of running wildly into the dark when a thin ray of hope shined down upon me. The elevator doors began to finally open. Without hesitation, I squeezed between the two doors before they had a chance to fully open. Once inside the carriage, I slammed both of my hands onto the first floor and closed door button repeatedly. The footsteps sounded like whatever it was broke into a mad sprint. To my relief, the doors began closing slowly, but I did not let up on the two buttons. "Go away!" I screamed in a desperate plea. The only response I got was the footsteps getting even faster. It sounded like they were only a few desks away now, almost beyond the elevator doors. I shut my eyes in fear, hoping the thing did not reach in to stop the doors in time. I could hear the footsteps end just outside of the doors, and nothing else. I guessed the doors were finally closed, but only when I felt the elevator move was when I got enough courage to open my eyes. The carriage was empty. I let go of my breath I was unconsciously holding. Bracing myself onto the railing, I brushed the sweat off my forehead and took note of my shaking hands. My heart was thundering in my ears. My clothes were drenched with sweat. I felt drained, but the fact that I was out of there brought a ton of relief. The elevator dinged and the doors parted. Taking no chances, I quickly sprinted towards the front doors and escaped to the cold night air. Feeling comforted from being outside the actual building, I took a few minutes to actually catch my breath and gather my thoughts. Did what just happened actually happen? What were those footsteps? Was something chasing me? I shuddered at these thoughts. Not wanting to stay near the office building another second, I ran through the empty moonlit parking lot and unlocked my car. The last thing on my mind was finishing the job I was assigned to. "Screw those carpets, screw the windows, screw the lights," I protested. I hastily got into the car and started the engine. Just as I was about to shift the car into drive, my eyes caught something in the fifth floor window. I don't know why I didn't just drive off right there. I could have just left the building and never looked back. Perhaps I wanted to linger on just a bit for confirmation, something to assure myself that I wasn't losing my mind and that there was something that really did happen to me. As my eyes lifted towards the 5th floor, I saw what I was not ready to see. It was a white, circular, featureless face. The face floated in the center of the window, with no body in sight. It was so unnaturally white that it showed jarringly in the dark windows. 2 black dots gazed towards me, emotionless and unblinking. Even in this cold weather, I could still feel chills running up and down my spine. It had no mouth, no features, nothing except those 2 dead eyes. Even down in the safety of my car, I still felt vulnerable and alone. Seconds later, the face seemed to step back and dissolve into the void. Taking this as my cue, I quickly shifted into drive and drove off, speeding out of the parking lot, into the cold and lonely night. Maybe I'll skip dinner tonight. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, you know what to do. Drop some gum onto that like button. Wait, no, don't do that. That's pretty gross. Actually, I don't care. Do whatever feels right. Shout out to the author of this story, Reddit user loungyoo. I will leave a link down below where you can check out the original post on No Sleep as well as their entire Reddit profile. Until next time, everybody, remember to stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next video.